enjoy the LCS. In fact, more of you might be enjoying the LCS than you did last year. I know I am, at least. And we had
It was a very exciting final.
Very exciting final. Very big upset. Liquid had been cruising.
It would have been better if we'd had the game 5, though. Like, it was setting up for what could have been a really great game 5, but obviously in the end, like, they just slipped on a banana peel and fucked the whole thing up. So
it was fun, though. It was a fun ending. Like, I didn't leave feeling unsatisfied by that ending, although perhaps the game 5 might have been hype. Like, Liquid is the team coming in with the MVP impact, who clearly deserved the MVP. He was the best player. APA and Yun had this glow up kind of ever since their time in Korean boot camp over before MSI. Team Liquid have been doing things internationally, taking out Fnatic a couple of times, kind of cemented their spots in the upper echelons. Their macro was really good. Their lane swapping was really good, right? And yet we come into this final series versus Flyquest, whom Team Liquid had already beat to get into the finals through the upper bracket, even though it was a little bit ropier than we thought it would be. But part of this I want to start with, which is Flyquest glow up, right? So what did Flyquest do coming into this split? Well, first off, they took Jensen out and put Quad in, which was a enormous upgrade, turns out. And also, there were some problems that we've talked about for a long time with Flyquest, which were as follows. Like, Masu and Busio, this duo, a lot of the time in spring, Masu's a rookie player, they would do things in lane that would set their team immensely far behind. Or Bwipo would be crazy old Bwipo on the top side, and he would do things that would cause huge strategic disadvantages in the early game, and it would be kind of like Inspired trying to drag them back, their corpses over the finish line. And everybody's like, well, Inspired's not very good. It's like, no, he has to deal with insane, bizarre situations in his side lane, and it's incredible that he's able to kind of stem the bleeding in the lanes a lot of the time, and he has to do it a lot of the time by sacrificing himself. Plus, Jensen was just fucking bad in spring, and Quad comes up, and we didn't know how Quad would start, synergizing with the team, but he has clicked in and been getting more adjusted over time. And there were a few things that happened. First off, Masu and Busio played both very well throughout playoffs. Masu was much better performer than Yun. Yun played quite badly over the course of these playoffs. Masu was much, much better. Busio didn't choke like he did in spring playoffs and MSI. Now, part of that is that when Mithy came to Flyquest, Mithy apparently started working very closely with Busio about his support play.
Right.
So that was a big change when Cloud9 got rid of him and Flyquest picked him up, was that Mithy was able to really...
If you think about that, your 2 least experienced players on Flyquest have coaches that are legendary players at mid and support. That helps.
Yes.
That does help.
Because you have Arrow on this team as well, right? Helping out with Masu. So I think that has been some...
And Nuke Knox, your fucking head coach as well for Quad. It's perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah, and probably Inspired and Bwipo don't need so much help. But the other thing was that Bwipo played a pretty respectable playoff series. I mean, he did have some oopsies in the early game at times, but he absolutely dumpstered Sniper in the series they played against 100 Thieves.
Yeah.
And the thing about Bwipo is it's always been his. So a lot of people don't like Bwipo because he does have a tendency to throw or to be overly aggressive. But it's a double-edged sword, because the thing you should like about Bwipo is that when he starts to put on pressure, he really puts on pressure super well. He actually can push the other team to the absolute limit, and he can actually cause errors in the other teams. He can force errors from the other team, or he can absorb so much pressure himself that it turns into an incredibly advantageous situation for his team. The problem is that when he gets behind, he still tries to overpressure or over-engage, and then he ends up throwing the game. But when he's ahead, there's almost no other player that you want to be ahead in the West except for Bwipo. He's one of the best players at pushing an advantage.
What you're talking about is, as far as I know, if you ever listen to how he thinks about the metagame of League of Legends, he actively is trying, like you're saying, to take people into chaotic waters, basically, where it's not the basic decision-making they're playing out in solo queue or random scrim. He's trying to make moves and put pressure on the map that makes them have to make a decision that they might, if they're less experienced, will make the wrong mistake from. So I know what you mean. It's clearly his strength as a player, but it also can be his weakness too, for sure.
Well, it's because he doesn't really know he doesn't know how to lose gracefully. Is his problem. It's when he starts losing, he will get, it's like he's the incremental machine. He will get you either incremental advantages or incremental disadvantages, and there's no real, there hasn't been a real difference between the two. However, what I will say about Bwipo in this series was that we didn't see, he did lose much more gracefully within this series when he started to get behind. I mean, we'll ignore the third game of the series where he had to blow his TP early because they fucked up they got fooled. I won't say they fucked up. They got fooled in the lane swap, so he had to use TP early, and then he immediately tried to all in impact, died, and then didn't have TP. That was fucking terrible. Okay. So we still got some of those moments. But from that point forward, he actually did play like a pretty good game. And was playing a lot better from behind.
To bring up the Garen, that was pretty cool. Remember that? Like, that's a fucking important match in a fight. He did bring it out. Fair play.
I mean, it's not only bringing out the Garen, right? It's like he had a hard time on the Garen early, but then he got advantages. He was split pushing and he was actually getting kills.
He was a terror by the end. Yeah,
he was a terror by the end. Yeah. And he was building like Infinity Edge 4th item, which was hilarious. I mean, it was, if we're being honest, probably not a good idea, but it was funny.
No, of course not. Sure.
It was funny to watch him sprinting out there and then stride breaker someone and then just one shot them. So he was definitely like feeling himself and having a good time in that final game. And he was like winning a lot of these side lane situations. He was actually catching up to the Lilia too. He took phase rush. So he was just incredibly fast on this Garen. He was shutting down APA, where it's like, if he hits the Tristana with the Garen Q, like there is no way APA gets silenced. He can't jump away. It was a good game from Bwipo. And he's had these carry performances. We also got to see his Urgot, which is like, I think he's like contractually obligated to bring out an Urgot every single like playoffs or at every point in his entire career. That was a terrible game that he played, but it was still there. I mean, he got completely rolled by impact. But for the most part, like the variance, the important things that had to happen for Flyquest were as follows. They needed to get a better mid laner, right? They did that. And they needed to integrate this Korean guy into the team. They did that. One of the most important things about Flyquest is the synergy between Quad and Masu. And I know this sounds weird because we don't talk about like mid 80 carry synergy a lot of the time, but Masu plays a lot of Ashe and like engage 80 carries. And this sets up Quad a lot for ults from the mid lane, whether it's a Yone or an Azir. Like these Ashe arrows have been very important. And his like snap decision making with Masu has been really, really good. So that's super important. I mean, Quad's Yasuo in the first game of the series was real good. Like, and Quad, unlike Thanatos, Quad is much more on top of TPing with, and joining the rest of his team. He had a really good TP into the bot lane in this game. I mean, and then Masu and Busio weren't making mistakes. Bwipo still had a certain amount of variance, but we got to see like he threw the brakes on when it started to get bad. And when it was going really well, like in the Garen game, he was just split pushing and being like a complete menace, killing enemies in the killing the opponent in the enemy jungle. And he was probably one of the biggest factors in their win because he was really putting the pressure on Team Liquid to the point where they couldn't really do anything about it. And it was a great game from him. So like, and then we haven't even talked about Inspired yet, but Inspired just
he obviously meant Yawn, but he said Yasuo, but he meant Yone, sorry. It's all good. It's all the same shit. Yeah, it's all good.
They're all win shitters, whatever.
I agree though. The obvious main topic of this final was Inspired. Like, mate, yes. I've said this in the past. Inspired is just fucking unbelievably good. Like, think about what he even played in this final, bro. He could just play every type of jungle. The guy's just actually like fucking brilliant. It just is. And the way he controls the game is so... Like, this isn't a guy making random decisions. You can see, like, the clocks, the gears turning as he plays the game, mate. He's just a really smart guy.
Yes. And, I mean, just constantly. And, like, one of the things that I think will fly under the radar about the way that this team decided to play in these finals is that I've talked about this with Adam in the past on BDS, but one of the things that Adam does is play weird champs that win in lane and put pressure on to distract, right? And Inspired reverted to playing a lot of AP carry junglers in this series. If you look at the last series that Team Liquid played against Flyquest, Inspired was playing fucking Amumu. He played 3 games of Amumu, and then he played 2 games of Maokai. He was playing AP engage tanks, okay? This series, he's on Lilia, Brand, Zyra, and then finally on the Ivern, right? But for most of the important games, he was on more carry-oriented champions. And the thing is, when Bwipo is absorbing a lot of pressure, what it allows Inspired to do, it occupies Umti's time. Like, Umti has to come deal with some of these fucking situations that are developing. Like, in the first game of this series, Umti is like ganking bot at level 3 on Maokai after half a clear, and this opens up everything for Inspired to do in the jungle in terms of counter jungling. So sure, you know, Bwipo is going to die, but the thing that it was doing was it was getting Inspired like 150 almost CS ahead of Umti in these games on champions that do a lot of damage if you give them items. So in a way, Bwipo was also serving as the Adam, right? And the way that it worked on BDS was Adam was kind of like the distraction in the top lane, and then they had a hyper carry in the bot lane, just like picking up all the farm unharassed so they could get it over the hump. In these games, it was just like Inspired farming a lot of the time and pathing well. And because he kept the laners kept drawing Umti's attention, you know, Inspired got significant advantages out of the jungle. And that was huge. That was huge.
Also, one of the reasons, by the way, why whenever I do the short side select with Rich's Wrath and Foxdrop, they have a thing where each year and each season we do like a season review. And one of their categories is the award goes, Wish You Were Here. And I've just said for the past 2 years, it's the player that you wish played in LEC. They always pick like Reckless. I always say Inspired's the obvious person. Like, if I would bring this guy back, if you want to end the G2 dynasty, bring Inspired back tomorrow, bro. Because between Inspired and Razork, we can make 2 whole brand new teams that could be as good as G2. Like, these guys are fucking cracked. But the problem is, because you all pissed him off and he's off in LCS now, and I imagine he's a couple of years into that green card process. If that motherfucker ever gets approved, he's never coming back. Well, there you go. It's too late then. He's never coming back then. He's staying in fucking LCS now. I want him back in LEC, mate. He's too good for LCS.
That's why LCS must go to Arkansas to convince Inspired to go back to Europe. It's Los Angeles, man. It's just ruining. It's ruining fucking players. It's ruining fucking players. Also, guys, if you want to check it out, Inspired is the guest for the Sack Down this week, also on this channel. So go. I'm sure he's gonna say a lot of spicy shit on that show. Oh. It should be very entertaining. So yeah, Inspired. I think Inspired was like clearly the MVP of this series. He was excellent, but I think a lot of why Inspired was successful will be lost on people, and a lot of it was just because like Umti was forced into pretty shitty situations where he had to gank a lot, and then also Umti maybe not as good as at the Ivern or the Lilia. Turns out, Umti's very good at some of these tank junglers. Maybe not so good when he has to play more of the carry style. It's never really been who he is as a player in Korea either. But credit to Flyquest. I mean, this is a team that just got better and better. And it was just, the problem with Flyquest was it was a lot of unforced errors from their side lanes that got them into this bad situation. And as soon as those lessened, they actually turned out to be a very strong team. Now, on the other side of things, like Team Liquid, man, Yun and APA did not show up to these finals. Yun's positioning was really problematic a lot of the time in these games. Like, he was getting caught out or not able to do any damage. APA, like, similarly was like really struggling much of the time. What's
hilarious is in game 4, he was actually at the point he was so fed that, as you said, essentially he could only be stopped by like everyone on the other team focusing him. And he was so fed, bro, especially because of some of those dives at the end by Flyquest, that like it's only the game ending like this probably could have killed him. Like, bro, in team fights, he was a nightmare already, like that champion. Like, it was doing that thing where if you don't instantly target him, he just does like 50 auto attacks and just grinds you down. So like that's that. If you are APA, it's such a fucking tease as well, because you're about to carry that game and then go to game 5, but then you just got your balls cut off last second.
Yeah, and obviously the end of that game, as we said earlier in the show, it's not something you could really prepare for, so it's an understandable mistake to make. And like, realistically, should Team Liquid have like sent back Impact or Core JJ to just fucking stand in front of the super minion waves so that they don't attack the Nexus and then the next creep wave spawns and et cetera, et cetera? Yes, like especially Core JJ was clearly fucking doing nothing in terms of taking down the enemy base. There was literally only a Leona alive, and Busio did do a great job of like stopping the minion wave so it wouldn't get close enough to the turrets. Because the minion wave has to be close to the turrets to drop their defenses, right? So you can actually burn through them. Busio bought a couple of seconds by like eing into the team and like distracting the minion wave, which was a good play. But, you know, and Whippo was going to come up, and sure, Whippo had TP, but also, you know, they could have actually interrupted his TP in Fountain, Team Liquid. Like they could have CC'd him and interrupted his TP in Fountain potentially. Or, I mean, I don't even think they needed to do that. I think they would have just won the game even if he did TP with TP channel time. And the fact that they had a couple of seconds and the Rel was not doing anything at all to speed up their push, right? And arguably Impact wasn't really either. If you were really afraid, I think you could send back the Cassante and like be fine. You could probably send back Umti and be fine too, honestly. They had choices. They just thought they could outrace it. And that, you know, that
the funniest response backstage of Nuke Duck and Mithy, because they don't even know the game is going to end, bro. They're actually for real getting ready to go like guys, game 5 draft, and then they see like what, and then they see the minions last second, and then they win the championship, even though they themselves completely admitted they were like getting prepped for game 5. Yes. If you don't know, that's what you always do, of course. Yes.
I did think it was super funny though that the story they tell is like Quad was just yelling the minions, and everybody inspired was like, I was just thinking about draft for game 5 or whatever.
You mean like some sort of like a fucking like Sherlock Holmes, like the minions, the minions.
But everybody else on his team apparently was like, what's he talking about? Like, and they didn't actually think that they were. You know, that they were going to win the game.
Horror entity. The minions! Look at them. They're eating him and they're going to eat me next. No! No! And if people don't know, what's mad is it took until now in 2024 for Nuke Dog to ever win a championship in any capacity ever. Like this fucker.
It was the year of the duck. It finally was the year of the duck.
It took 10 years. He finally won. Fair play.
The 10th year is the year of the duck. It's like the Chinese zodiac. It just takes, you know, it only cycles around every 12 years, and he started at an unlucky time. So now it's finally the year of the duck. That's true. We finally got the meme to be correct. Also, I just love Nuke Duck's interviews because you know how they do those coaches interviews at the start of the game, which I really enjoy, by the way, because I think it does a good job of setting the stakes for viewers. But Nuke Duck's interviews are always so shit.
Well, I mean, the point is, Monty, he's doing that thing, which, by the way, ironically, that is, if you remember, Monty, at the beginning of League of Legends, what people used to believe. Remember, like the Koreans, for example, think you should not give no information away, like they'll hear what we're saying. But the problem is, in the modern day, in interviews, mainly for the fans, Nuke Duck, but Nuke Duck does it as though he's being like interrogated by the police and his lawyer didn't get there yet. And he's sort of like, no. Yes, we did. He just doesn't give any info because his logic is if even one fragment, but he makes the interview ask, though it's true.
I also just love the fact that he's so laser focused on the game. He's like watching the screen while they're doing it. It's like, Nuke Duck,
yes,
you can't affect what's going on the screen right now. Like, truly, you could spend 15 seconds giving a real answer. No, he can't. He's just like,
definitely not. No. I love it.
It's very funny. Whereas I think a lot of the other coaches, like Spawn, gives really good interviews and actually gives you insights into the team, you know, when that's happening.
It's a big issue though, Monty. I did this as a tweet, but it actually is the sad thing, is for this Team Liquid, I did a tweet that was like this. This Team Liquid here's the problem. They were going for the title of best NA team ever, but they're not going to get it now. They almost did. Like, they almost beat T1 at fucking MSI. They almost beat them at EWC. They almost won both champions. They didn't, though. It's just almost unfortunate. So, unfortunately, unless they do some crazy Worlds run, like, this team is really good. By the way, they actually do have some fundamental aspects that make them one of the best Western teams ever. But if you notice, there's that slight gap. There's something slightly missing. And they just had a bunch of times they haven't been able to get it over the line. It's just unfortunate, isn't it? Shows again how narratives, like we talk about Gen G, you can build them up. They take a while to build up, but they just get chopped down instantly, unfortunately, by a bad result.
Yeah, I think Yun, too, you know, he's a player that was excelling earlier this year in like Vera Solution meta. And he's been good since then, but he struggled a lot, I think, in these playoffs. I don't know if that was nerves or whatever it was, but it felt like he kept going back to like fringe meta picks like this Callista, right? Which we saw in LCK as well, like Pays played it, but it was much more prevalent, in their run, especially when they were, beating Flyquest in some of these games in the last series. The Callista didn't come out this time, except for the one game. They were trying to take the Ashe away instead, or they, I think mysteriously, what was very mysterious to me was that they blind picked Kai'Sa, and then Masu, who doesn't play Zeri, played Zeri into it when it's like been a Zeri counter. Like, I didn't even really like Flyquest's draft in the final game of the series that they ended up winning. It felt very off to me, but Yun just felt like he had kind of run out of options. And the thing about Team Liquid too that's weird is that you ban the Ziggs, but they're not actually flexing the Ziggs into the bot lane. So you don't I think have a very meaningfully meta champion pool for Yun at this point in time. Also, I just get tilted when everybody in NA says his name Yon for some reason, even though his Korean actual name is Yun. And that's how you say it. So I don't know where they got this idea that it's pronounced yawn, like you're fucking tired. That was a weird one.
That should be like the meme version. Like it's yawn or yawn.
But they always do that. Exactly. All the casters like yawn. It's just like, I'm like, what? he just never corrected them.
They think his name is just On, but with a Y.
Well, no, his first name in Korean is Yun Ho. That is his name, is Yun Ho. That is his actual first name. So Yun comes from Yun Ho, the first syllable of his name, and they just call it Yun. I don't get it. I don't get it.
Which just reminds me of the old school Flash meme from TeamLiquid.net, which was him with like a cool thing like this. And he was like, my name is Lee. Now bring me the young horse, because his name is Lee Young Ho. People don't know. So that was just an old school Team Liquid on back in the
day. Yep. Young Ho, very, very, very famous name. But yeah, his name is Yano. I did whatever.
Well, here's the thing. In some ways, guys, you actually did prove me wrong. He absolutely is an American player. My bad. I mistook him for a Korean. Because I will say, that is the one thing I do find really annoying, Monty. Remember, the narrative from summer and spring, as in like end of spring playoffs into MSI, into EWC, is supposed to be this, Monty. Wow, Yon's way better than we thought he was. No, they took the narrative as he was never, ever questionable, and now he's just a cracked out elite player forever. So that's a ridiculous overcorrection the other way, guys. Like, he's still quite an inexperienced player, who I agree with you, Monty. He had that one meta that he looked really good in, and a couple of big tournaments that the Team Liquid as a team was awesome in. But it's not like he's just a made man forever. Like you saw in this final, he can have times he's not as good. Yeah. Like he did. By the way, Matsu was better than him. That's a totally legit
Matsu was straight up better than him.
You're not hating on him. Yeah, you're not hating on him.
I mean, Quad was also straight up better than APA. Like Quad is, that was a very...
Oh, Monty, here's why I love trash talk. Right, look, I'm not the biggest APA fan, but obviously, when he does all the shit talking, and now they've finally adapted on LCS where they show you it.
It's great.
Did you see that moment where when APA died in like some ridiculous fashion? I can't remember in the game. They showed the all chat where Expired did the XD to him. Oh, I love it. I fucking love it. I love it because you just know he saw that, and that's the banter we wanted. That was fire. That was straight fire. The XD. The XD.
I mean, I enjoyed Impact in the game after the Urgot Jax matchup when it was his pick, just flipping back and forth between Urgot and Jax after he clapped him.
That was good.
Now,
see, this is some quality gamesmanship. I enjoy this.
It was very funny. Now we could argue, Thorin, that maybe Team Liquid should not have picked fucking Gangplank in that game.
Oh, really? Sure.
Why don't we just pick, let me think about this again. Jax again. Why don't we just play Jax into Renekton? By the way, if you see
MVP of the split, it's not like he's old Impact. He's actually supposed to be the best player in the LCS. Can he please have a champion he can carry on, please?
Oh, well, I mean, he can carry on GP in theory, but I mean, the issue with the GP here is that it just doesn't synergize with the rest of the team. If you're going to take Ivern double AD carry, can I please have a melee top laner? And yes, guys, I know GP is technically a melee top laner. By that, I mean a melee top laner that you want in melee range of the enemy. You don't want GP in melee range of the enemy most of the time in team fights, right? But if you're going to have the Ivern there, you want to actually power up your front line and send them in, right? This is why Ivern Renekton works so well, for example. But why don't we just, first off, if we're being real, if you see Zyra Seraphine, what we want to pick there is Olaf. Like, Olaf will absolutely just destroy Seraphine in that back line, but he doesn't play it. Impact isn't an Olaf player, so I guess we just get GP, even though we could also just play Jax again. So I found this very confusing about Team Liquid's drafts. And then you get into the final game in this series, and we get this kind of like, well, I guess we're just going to play Cassante now. One more time. Again, Impact is the MVP of this league. Maybe we should try and do something else with him because he was kind of good on the Jax in these series. So I don't know, man. Like I was kind of underwhelmed, but especially that last game. I mean, the GP pick just doesn't make any sense with the composition that they have, and it wasn't really going to do anything. And turned out to be relatively useless in that game. Like, if you want to do that, Thorin,
see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content, well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.